The Centresteer podcast is sponsored by Commonwealth Classics and Knightsbridge Overland.
This month's Centresteer podcast is sponsored by Commonwealth Classics. Commonwealth Classics is a direct importer of classic vehicles from Europe and South America and has a rotating collection of rare and unique vehicles in their showroom located in Virginia, just 45 minutes from Washington, D.C. Visit www.cwclassics.com to view their current inventory of classic vehicles. Thanks, Commonwealth Classics, for your continued support of the podcast.
The Centresteer podcast, a podcast by, for, and about Land Rover owners.
Welcome to the Centresteer podcast, podcast number 122 for May of 2023, the 76th year of Land Rover and the 11th year of the podcast. I'm your host, John Costage. Joining me via the virtual campfire, we've got Harold, we've got Dixon, and we've got Morgan. It's a full house.
Beats three of a kind.
Are we now a house of brands? Or I guess we'll get to that later.
Oh, yes. So that would mean it's no longer the Centresteer podcast. It's the John brand, the Morgan.
No, it's the
CSP right. Is the trust mark.
Yes, exactly.
Our guest this month is Steve Owen. He's a Brit who moved to America, and he'll be driving his Series 1 over 800 miles from Wisconsin to New York to attend the Diamond Jubilee. Stay tuned for Steve's preview of that journey and his other overland adventures. 2023, if you don't already know, is the 75th anniversary of Land Rover and the 10th anniversary of this very podcast. Thanks to all of you, our listeners, for listening and engaging with us over the years. And special thanks to our Patreon and Buy Me a Tea subscribers for their support. It does mean a lot, and we appreciate each and every one of you. And a special shout out to Bob Steele. He commented about last month's episode, celebrating 75 years of Land Rover, calls for indomitable discourse. The 16 individuals who share their memories delivered. May I offer 16 brown waters to the Centresteer crew for bringing them together, and more important, for bringing all of us together. Thank you, John, Harold, Morgan, and Dixon. It just doesn't get any better than this. And if you receive emails from Bob, as Dixon and I have been for the Jubilee, he often ends his emails that way.
16 brown waters. That's a pretty serious flush.
Well, thank you, Bob.
And thanks to Scott, who is our latest Patreon supporter. Thank you very much, Scott. We appreciate you coming aboard as a Patreon supporter. This is your monthly reminder. We're now down to single digits. You have 2 months to get your Rover ready for Pittsburgh Vintage Grand Prix in July of 2023. And stay tuned. In just a minute, we'll give you more details. Before that, though, is the Anarch's Diamond Jubilee, which is June 15th through the 18th. You have one, well, I guess technically you have 2 weeks now.
You have 2 weeks, yeah.
Yeah.
1 month, you're going to be late.
I guess we skipped from 2 months down to 2 weeks.
The events are happening mid-month, and the show drops beginning of the month, so yeah.
Join over 650 of your fellow Land Rover owners in Cortland, New York. This promises to be an event we'll talk about around campfires at other events for years. You don't want to miss this one.
That's a whole lot of people.
It's a lot of people. It's a lot of trucks.
Perhaps more than I want to deal with, but I'm going anyway.
All of us are going. We'll see. All of us will be there. Dick's helping out with organizing, as I am. Harold, you're showing up, and so is Morgan. And we're all going to be part of a special podcast mashup with our friends over at the Underpower Hour. That will be on Thursday evening during the Diamond Jubilee. It's a kickoff event on Thursday evening. And what's exactly going to happen at the podcast mashup? Not completely sure. We're still working out those details, but it promises to be a lot of fun. Yes.
Well, there has been the whole idea of Ike and Dixon in an 80-inch against John and Steve and a Freelander, but that requires a NAS Freelander that works to actually appear. So
that's something you've been pushing.
I didn't come up with that one. I put that one.
Steve has a lot of friends in the TV industry who probably green screen them into a Freelander pretty easily.
That is true. Very true. I didn't think of that angle. That's underhanded.
Now, does that mean that leaves Morgan and me swing the hammers?
So the event in Cortland, it looks to be really interesting. If you can make it, please do. I think it promises to be very interesting, exciting, a lot of activity going on. Land Rover is bringing Land Rover experienced drivers who will be with you in your vehicle to give you assistance as you go off-roading and give you that in-vehicle instruction. There will be an RTV course. There's the inaugural NARC Cup, which is a club participant activity that's similar to an RTV competition. And
it's
that is
the Olympics of the North American clubs, basically.
Yes. And each club will have a cheering area while the NARC Cup is going on, and clubs are encouraged and invited to participate in that. So you can bring your vuvuzelas or whatever it is to help cheer on your clubs as they participate in the NARC Cup. And we're going to have several expo sessions. Nick Dimbleby will be there. Bill Burke. We'll have Justin Monin from Lucky 8. Kim McCullough, who's a former vice president of brand marketing for the Discovery 2 in North America. She will be there. Lynn Dupuis, Ottawa Valley Search and Rescue, winner of the 2023 Defender Service Award, will be there.
There's actually 2 Nicks that are going to be there.
That's right. Nick Rogers, who's Land Rover Engineering and Vehicle Development, he will also be attending and have an expo session. And also, Tread Lightly is going to be there with Daphne Green and Bob Burns. They're going to be doing an expo session. And that's in addition to all the trails. There'll be 30 miles of trails for drivers and vehicles of any type and experience level. And those will be open during the day. There will be limited evening driving capability. Trails will be opened every night until 11 p.m. when everybody has to be off the trails by 11 p.m. It's on Friday evening. Friday evening, the trails will be closed at 5 o'clock. That's to give everyone who wants to attend Diamond Jubilee dinner the opportunity to do so, because we'll have a lot of volunteers helping out to give you access to the trails at rally control, handling registration, handling the base camp area. So there's a lot of volunteers helping out with event, and we want to make sure we have the opportunity to also attend the Jubilee dinner.
There is the vendor village. Lots of interesting stuff to see there. I will be there a good bit of the weekend, the vendor village. Good luck finding me.
You want to tell us who you're with?
It takes the sport of it, doesn't it?
Okay. Try to track down Harold in vendor village.
Oh, there's a number of parts vendors there. If you're actually curious to see who's behind the telephone from Atlantic British or Rovers North or Three Brothers up in Canada, as well as a number of companies and so on that supply optional equipment such as Lucky 8 and the rest. If you're interested in meeting and chatting with these people, they're all going to be there.
So, Harold, will you be wearing your Where's Waldo costume?
I will not.
That does make it harder, too.
But I will have said Waldo with me. Valdi reference. Yeah, we'll be there. And I'm counting on people to take pictures and post them for me so that I don't have to do so much work.
And there's also a lot of information on the website. Definitely go check that out. You can see the full details of the schedule, directions, and trail map, which has the downloadable versions of the trail maps, as well as the site maps for camping and the general areas, the village and the campgrounds. Definitely check that out. LandRover75.com is the website.
And I would also like to point out for the Jubilee dinner on Friday, we'll be by the lodge across 392, which is like the main road that comes in between where we'll be and the lodge. Where we'll be is like base camp and the mountain trails, and 392 is in the middle of that. And you'll have the lodge and the lookout, which is where the Diamond Jubilee will take place. And that will be, as I said, across the street from where base camp is. And there will be a shuttle bus. You can see the shuttle bus moving around and being able to get you places.
I would point out that everything's within walking distance. There will be a shuttle bus there for people that actually need the aid of getting from A to B, or if it happens to be pouring rain and you want to stay a little bit dry, but everything.
It never rains at a Land Rover event. What are you talking about?
Of course not. It was a Dust Bowl for the 50th, so we'll see what it is for the 75th. But at the same time, everything's within walking distance that you see on the site map. It is not a huge resort.
And it also, if it does turn out to be another Dust Bowl event and you're feeling too dry, there is a water park. It is not much further beyond the lodge, so you can always attend that.
Is that included in the registration?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
It very much so is. And if you're looking to go on the trails, of which, as I said, there are 30 miles, it's important that you attend one of the drivers' meetings. They take place twice a day. And it's important to attend those so you understand what's happening on the trails, what the current conditions are, what to look out for. There's also going to be guided or group activity trails that you can go on. You can go by yourself if you wish. Of course, that's not recommended. Always go with someone, but you don't have to go with a guided group. But look at the schedule for the information as to when you can go off on your own, when there are group guided activities on the trail. But please do attend one of the drivers' meetings before you go on the trail, not after, before you go on the trail. And your lanyard or your badge that you will get when you register will have a means of which they will know that you've attended a drivers' meeting. Because as you cross through rally control, which is a choke point, there is only one way to get on the trail. And that's also how you get to Vendor Village, all that area goes through one central point that is next to the base camp area. They will check for that. You've gone to a driver's meeting. Hey, I'm going to go off-road now, and it's 10 o'clock, and I missed the driver's meeting in the morning. Yeah, you're not going to get on the trail. You have to wait for the next driver's meeting.
They will check to see that your papers are in order.
Yes. Yep. Please plan accordingly. Do look at the event schedule before you attend so you get a sense of when things are happening, when things open, and when things close, so you can plan accordingly. There's a lot going on, and you can't do everything. So you're going to have to plan ahead. If you're going to go on a trail ride with Bill Burke, that may be when something else is going on. So please do go to LandRover75.com and check out all the details for the event. We try to keep that up to date for you as best as possible. If there are any errors, that's my fault because I've been responsible to keep that up to date.
So you now know who to blame.
That's right. Exactly.
So one question for you, John, on that subject. I think I saw on the website, but I want to clarify for some of our friends who might not have seen it. The event is, I believe, dog friendly.
Yes, it is. Yeah. And thank you for that, Harold. If you go on to the website and you go to the information section, there's a Jubilee FAQ. Also check out the Jubilee FAQ because that does have some other information there, including Harold's question. Is it dog friendly? Yeah, dogs are permitted in camp. They must be on a leash at all times. And you should probably also clean up.
You are responsible for them in all respects.
Yes, exactly. So check out the FAQ. There's also a section there on communication, which we added recently. If you do not have a GMRS radio, which is recommended radio type, you can get a discount through Midland. Order that soon. You can use your FRS radios, but details on the FAQ page about communication and how we will communicate with folks. We're also going to be using texting. We are assured that Wi-Fi there is excellent because they can handle the skiers.
I would assume that the bandwidth is pretty good, but all those skiers, of course, want to stream a movie while they're careening down the mountain.
Yes.
Now, the one thing to consider is that Wi-Fi signals bounce off leaves quite well, which are generally not there when the skiers are there.
There's also general event information, the FAQ rounds using powered vehicles and also about the use of drones. Basically, the only people who are off drones will be on ARC staff or the Greek Peak will be using drones. But you are able, on the positive side, you are welcome to bring any Land Rover you own, both old and new. We welcome you and hope you will attend. And we look forward to seeing you there. All four of us in the podcast will be at the Diamond Jubilee. We look forward to seeing you. Say hi.
Hi.
Not now, Harold. You got to wait for the Jubilee.
Just checking.
You're getting ahead. You're just practicing. I appreciate that. Also, we have details now for the Vintage Grand Prix here in Pittsburgh. It will take place July 22nd and 23rd. And special one-time, 1 year only, we're going to have a Land Rover Spotlight Show. The Vintage Grand Prix, the Pittsburgh Vintage Grand Prix, has an international car show section. And this will be at Shenley Park in Pittsburgh, as I said, July 22 and 23. You will need to register for the event, and we'll have a link in the show notes for that if you are going to come. As part of the registration, you will be able to be in a special showcase area where all the Land Rovers that have registered for this will be parked together. If you have attended the Vintage Grand Prix previously, we will not enter at that area because that is the British car show section. That is by the Western Pennsylvania Triumph Club. They will continue to do their registration and from their registration access area for this year only. If you register for the Land Rover Spotlight, you will then enter from a different location, which will be included in the registration information. Also, there will be a tent that is being sponsored by the local Land Rover dealer here in the Pittsburgh area. That's Land Rover North Hills and Land Rover South Hills. It's a Ray Hall dealership. They are going to sponsor that tent.
Which means we don't have to stand out in the blistering sun all frickin' day.
Yes. And we will have excellent location, Harold, where the dealership sets up. My understanding is we're at the top of the hill there and in that same general area. So current understanding. So it'll be a good location. And also, you will get a 6-pack of Helltown branded beer, Centresteer English Ale. It will have a special Land Rover design can on it. It's going to have a Defender on the can. It's being finalized as we speak, and we will receive a 6-pack that's sponsored by Helltown.
And Centresteer, apparently.
That is for $75. If you have come to the Vintage Grand Prix before and you registered with the Triumph Club, I think it's like $25 or $30. Yes, this year it's going to be a little more, but we'll get that showcase spotlight area. And most importantly, I almost forgot, on Sunday, this is the cool thing, I think, we will get a lap of the race course. The opening ceremonies on Sunday, the 23rd at 11 a.m., and we'll take a parade lap of the track in our own vehicles, our own Land Rovers. You can bring as many people as you can fit in the vehicle, and it's a 2.3-mile circuit of the track. We do have to start lining up at 9:30 on Sunday.
Is passing allowed?
I don't believe so, sir.
No bump, none of that stuff?
I'm probably going to say no.
And Sunday's races should be extra interesting, having us pre-slick the track for them.
Yes, that's good. Yeah, don't let them know that. Though they probably already have taken that into
If
the
they
other.
don't know that by now, they should know better.
That's the Vintage Grand Prix in Pittsburgh. We're encouraging you, we're asking you, we're inviting you to come on to the Vintage Grand Prix in July. Looking forward to seeing you. I think it's going to be interesting and it's going to be a fun time. We're going to get lap and we're going to get a special place to show off our vehicles in the showcase area. So this is a one-time only activity. We're doing it just for the 75th anniversary. Next year, if any of our friends with the Triumph Club are listening, we're going back to the normal way that we would join in the British Car Day. Yeah, you need to register for the event ahead of time. Please do so at the link in the show notes. And I'll also put out an Instagram post here shortly after the podcast drops on May 31st. That is the Vintage Grand Prix and an ARC's Diamond Jubilee. We look forward to seeing you at both events. Now it's time for the news. First up, Jaguar Land Rover revenue surged 25% as chip crisis eases. JLR posted a dramatic increase in revenue and profit and reducing its towering order backlog in the final financial quarter of 2022. Rounding up its financial performance for the 12 months for March 2023, revenues were £22 billion, up 25% year on year, off the back of a 9% increase in sales and an increase in price per vehicle. Overall, the firm sold 321,362 cars globally, of which nearly 100,000 were in the fourth quarter alone, a 24% year-on-year increase. Adrian Mardell, JLR's boss, pointed to a dramatic improvement in the supply of crucial semiconductor chips, which allowed for much higher production volumes than in the same period last year. Full-scale production of the new Range Rover and Range Rover Sport was integral to the increase in revenue, with volumes of the pair increasing 27,000 units in the third quarter to 33,000 in the final quarter.
Yeah, it's a lot easier to make money when you can actually build the product.
Absolutely.
If you have to ask, you can't.
Do they supply any breakdown between the production figures coming out of Solihull versus coming out of Slovakia? Be interesting to know. Production and so on is rising there.
How much of a Range Rover production is in Slovakia? Is the Range Rover production still all in the UK, aside from the China market, which I think builds its own?
I don't think there's a breakdown of that on Land Rover's press release. Improved results in the quarter reflect a significant improvement in volumes as chip constraints have continued to ease. Wholesale volumes for the fourth quarter were 95,000 units, excluding their joint venture in China, up 19% compared to the quarter ending 31 December 2022, which is 24% compared to the same quarter a year ago. Compared to the prior year, wholesale volumes were higher in all markets, led by overseas up 62%, the UK up 24%, Europe up 22%, China up 17%, and North America up 2%. North America was up 2%. The order book remained with about 200,000 client order quarter end, down from a peak of 215,000.
Okay.
So not really a breakdown by where they're manufactured.
Or by model.
Yeah.
It'll come out later on, as they usually do break it out. It was just a curious question.
Absolutely. And also, while we're on the press release, they announced an investment of £15 billion over 5 years in electrification and digital transformation. The JLR Howwood plant in the UK will become a all-electric manufacturing facility. Over 11,300 employees and partners reskilled for electrification, with a further 11,600 in training, and a new partnership with Tata Technologies to achieve faster time to market through new cloud technologies, which hopefully might help with some ordering and some other things. And then my favorite, so to speak, they announced House of Brand Strategy to amplify our brands. Range Rover, Defender, Discovery, and Jaguar with Land Rover as a trust mark. And I'm now emphasizing this part, visible on our vehicles, websites, social media, sales, and retail sites. So they're making sure to tell you that the Land Rover mark is not going away. We'll talk a little bit more about that in detail here in just a few minutes. Next, JLR is set massive electric car battery plant in the UK, as I just mentioned. They have decided to pick the UK over Spain to build this new electric car battery plant that the BBC has reported. And they're getting ready to sign the deal. Tata's chairman is reportedly scheduled to meet with the Prime Minister of the UK in the middle of next week. It comes as the British motor industry scrambles to boost capacity for electric cars, which are set to become very popular. A deal has not yet been signed for the plant in Somerset. The BBC quotes sources as saying, but an agreement is being drafted. So I guess that's a good sign for the building of vehicles in the UK, especially Land Rovers.
Yeah, especially because it means that they won't have to compete with other factories for procuring their batteries. They'll just have to compete on the raw materials.
Or deal with the importation from Europe.
They'll only have to import the raw materials.
Yes, that's a good point. Good point. Next, the glorious return of a humble car feature. I thought this was worth mentioning. A growing number of automakers are backpedaling away from huge complex touchscreens that have infested dashboard design over the past 15 years. Buttons and knobs are coming back. The touchscreen pullback is a result of consumer backlash, not the enactment of overdue regulations or the awakening of corporate responsibility. Many drivers want buttons, not screens, and they've given car makers an earful about it. This is from Slate.com. Auto executives have long brushed aside safety concerns about their complex displays, and all signs suggest that they would have happily kept doing so, but their customers are revolting, which has forced them to pay attention. So that's a good sign. There was a couple examples here. One was Volkswagen, which owns Porsche, has acknowledged that customer feedback led it to drop its much-loathed steering wheel touch controls that were nearly impossible to use without looking down from the windshield. And executives had suggested adding more buttons to its future EVs. And meanwhile, a few big automakers that skipped the touchscreen craze have not been shy about letting the world know while offering new digs at their counterpart. Quote, I think people are going to get tired of these big black screens, which is the Nissan Senior Vice President of Global Designs. He told Green Car Reports. Hyundai, too, has voiced its commitment to buttons and dials. So maybe Land Rover will get involved in that at some point.
I've seen a fair amount of studies that show that the tactile buttons are actually safer because they require less looking and they're faster. You can find them quicker without looking.
That's why, while texting and driving has always been a problem, it wasn't as much of a problem back in the Nokia T9 days, where you didn't have to look at the screen to type if you were good.
You just had to have a thumb that you could do by feel.
Exactly. And if you weren't good at texting, you really couldn't do it while driving anyway.
I would like these automakers to figure out a way to get your phone to connect to Bluetooth easier and faster, because I still see a lot of people hold up their phone while they're driving and they're talking into their phone on speakerphone, apparently.
Yeah, I still don't understand that one.
What do you mean? You don't understand people doing it, or you don't understand what I'm talking about?
No, yeah, people doing that.
I don't get it. I don't get it. Most cars now have Bluetooth that you can put over the car and still keep two hands on the wheel. And why are you holding up your phone all the time?
It all connects automatically.
You have to set it up once, and it should connect automatically. Yes.
And that's all fine and dandy for receiving calls, but initiating calls often does not work that well.
That, I guess, would be a valid point. Although I've often have this. I'm on get into the Jetta, which has 2013 technology. Once it connects, and it'll switch the car over to Bluetooth, and my call continues on in the car. And I've done it the opposite direction too, where I've been on a call in the car, turn off the car, it switches right back to the phone. This stuff is doable and has been. And
that works reliably 95% of the time. And for that 5%, so we'll just deal. Move on.
Except if they're weaving across the highway.
As far as changeover and stuff is what I'm saying. Yeah. I think finding someone in your contact list and initiating a call is hard to do, whether you're Bluetoothed or not.
And maybe it's just this era's clock on the VCR.
Next up, Land Rover Classic Defender Works V8 Islay Edition revealed. It celebrates Wilks and whiskey. Land Rover Classic has created a limited edition based on the brand's origin lore. It's called the Land Rover Classic Defender Works V8 Islay Edition, built on Defender Works V8. The foundation is a wagon restored with parts from donor vehicles made from 2012 to 2016, powered by a 5-liter V8 with 399 horsepower, shifted through an 8-speed automatic, upgraded with a new suspension and LED lighting. The hallmark bits glorify co-founder Spencer Wilks on the more managerial side of Land Rover's inception, while brother and co-founder Maurice was more about the engineering. Spencer drove a Series 2A, an early prototype, around his Lagan estate on Islay, the 5th largest Scottish island located off the country's southwest coast. His 2A is on display in the Land Rover Classic collection. On one of his trips around the property, he was driving a Land Rover mule cobbled atop a heavily modified Rover car platform. When state gamekeeper Ian Duncan saw the test vehicle, he's reported to have asked Wilks if he was driving a Land Rover. That's where the company name came from. The new Works V8 is inspired by the Museum P Series 2A. It's finished in heritage gray with matching wheel arches, a nod to the mid-gray of the original, with limestone roof and steel wheels. A classic grille is paired with a classic Land Rover badging, from the front fascia to the mud flaps. A discrete GXC 639C along the side recalls the license plate on the Wilks Series 2. The cab fits premium ebony leather Defender seats ahead of an instrument panel with heritage gray accents plus carpeted footwells. The Islay woolen mill produced a special tweed that appears on the seats, door cards, armrests, and sun visors. Its blue, purple, green, and yellow hues cued off the Islay landscape. Then there's the stowage space and cup holders trimmed with oak from Kilomachan, hopefully I'm saying that right, Distillery whiskey barrels. Wilks' granddaughter, Kathy Wills, founded the distillery with husband Anthony in 2005. For this occasion, distillery produced a special 639 whiskey to go with the special edition. Land Rover Classic will make 30 examples. 17 is a short wheelbase 90. 13 is a 7-seater 110. Pricing starts at $290,000 American for the 90. $309,000 US for the 110. Place your orders now, gentlemen.
How many barrels of whiskey does each one come with?
I think that it is a limited supply whiskey. You can't get it in Ontario, of course, but this is Canada. It is available from the UK.
It comes with a bottle and a little tray that fits in your center cubby made from whiskey barrels.
That's correct.
Yes.
It's cute, but I don't know that it's $3,000 cute.
The whiskey's available for £79 plus shipping.
Yeah. See, there you go.
I had never heard the naming story before, that it came from driving around that test mule. So was it really a 2A? That was what, 10 years in before it got the name the Land Rover? Is that
I don't think
true?
that something doesn't add up.
No, yeah, that's can't be right.
No, they had Lander on the badge on the 80-inch.
Yeah.
But they have a placard inside the vehicle that says it's the Land Rover Islay. It says, when driving his heavily modified Rover 12 on the island of Islay, Spencer Wilks was asked if he was driving a Land Rover. The name stuck.
I don't think he was driving.
That would be from the 40s then.
Yeah, he wasn't driving his Series 2. He was driving one of his early pre-development mules.
Okay, that makes more sense. I think this article got that little confused then. Yeah, because you can see there is a picture of a Series 2 here. That's probably his Series 2, but it was not the test mule, I suspect.
No, two different trucks.
Good looking 90. I thought that's pattern for the seats is nice. Yeah. Alas, I do not have $309 to get the 110.
You could build a couple of really nice custom 110s for that. Probably 2 110s and a 90 if you're really careful about it.
Next up, Ottawa Volunteer Search and Rescue gets decked out Land Rover Defender 130. This year, Ottawa Volunteer Search and Rescue of Ottawa, Ontario received a customized Defender 130 for winning the search and rescue category, one of 5 charities in North America to receive a vehicle. The beast in question is an all-new 2023 Land Rover 130, which is the longest model. Outside, its livery has been specially designed. It also sports the ladder roof rack options, 3-row seats. It can fit up to 8 occupants. The Defender 130 also deploys 2,516 liters of cargo space when all rows are folded. Although, you can't fold the seats completely flat in a 130. Anyway, mechanically, the Defender 130 features an electronic air suspension system with 75 millimeters of additional lift at the front end and the rear in and off-road height to help the driver clear obstacles, and 100 millimeter of wading depth, which is a key element of search and rescue operations. So there you go. Dixon, you guys got yourself a 130.
And if you're interested in seeing it, I understand they will be bringing it down to Greek Peak for the 75th.
Let's hope there's no need for it back in Ontario.
Or really at Greek Peak, for that matter.
I like the Pelican on the side because it's apparently Case also gave some money, I think.
There's a big Pelican box on the roof, but it doesn't have Pelican pollen sacks.
You're right. Yeah, yep. Pelican awarded $25,000 US as part of the Defender Awards. And finally, in the news, it's a very quick news month. The Ineos Grenadier to start at $71,500 in the US. Ineos has finally announced pricing deeds for the long-awaited Grenadier in the US and Canada, confirming that it will start at $71,500 in the US and $91,929 in Canada. Pre-orders from the online configure will be accepted from May 31st, and Ineos plans to start deliveries in the US by the end of the year, while the Grenadier will reach the hands of customers in Canada in the first quarter of 2024. While Ineos hasn't announced specifications for the US or Canadian spec models, the article Car Scoop says we do not deliver 282 horsepower, 332 pound-feet of torque with the BMW-sourced 3-liter Turbo 6 engine. It also remains unclear if the diesel version will make it to North America. In Europe, the diesel has 246 horsepower, 406 pound-feet of torque. Both engines are mated to an 8-speed automatic transmission, 2-speed transfer case, and permanent 4-wheel drive system.
Yeah, it seems, compared to some of the other options out there, it's quite affordable. We'll have to see how it takes off over here. I have to admit, I haven't gone through their site and played with the options
I was going to say
to see how high you can spec it out.
Be interesting to do a comparison for feature. I think it's going to be a few bucks more than the new Defender, but the potential for being a lot cooler at the same time.
Yeah, they say it's equivalent if spec one out, depending on the different editions that the Ineos has, you can get up into Defender prices. So I think there'll be some equivalency there.
The biggest question is probably, do you want to be one of the first owners of something that's new? People that bought the new Defender, there were some teething issues and so on. So it'll be interesting to see how it works out.
On the other hand, they're buying all the expensive drivetrain bits. That's already proven tech.
Yeah, but it's the integration of it all that is where it gets interesting.
Sure, I agree there, but there's fewer potential problems than something that's a clean sheet like the Defender was.
I don't think the Ineos has 92 computers in it like the new Defender does.
Yes, that's another issue.
Yeah. Oh, and it has a lot more physical buttons and switches, so that's a positive.
In fact, switches than one would need.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah.
Those overhead switches.
Because they give you switches that you can use later for stuff that they haven't planned for, which is really a neat idea.
We look forward to the future Ineos Grenadier podcasts and rally events. All right, before we wrap up the news, did want to talk about the Trustmark controversy, if you will, and maybe summarize that. And we had thoughts on that. I know we talked about it last month, but last month was a celebratory month. This month is less so, and wanted to bring that up. So maybe you're not aware, Land Rover Corporate came out with a reimagination strategy, and they said as part of the reimagination strategy that they were going to emphasize the individual models and give those prominence, and the Land Rover name would get moved to what they call a trust mark, so it would not get as much prominence when naming the model. Instead of having a Land Rover, Range Rover Evoque, it would just be the Range Rover Evoque. So you would have the make would be Range Rover and model would be Evoque, instead of it being the make being Land Rover and the model being Range Rover Evoque, because of that had all that confusion. I think partly because they had confusion with those sub-brands, if you will, sub-models. The Range Rover Sport is another example of that. And we're going to take each of the models and effectively make them makes, kind of like General Motors has done, where General Motors is the trust mark, and then you have Chevrolet, Cadillac, GMC, and Buick. There we go. I was trying to remember what they had left. And then there's individual models from there. So that's what they did, they announced that and caused a lot of consternation. A gut punch, I think, is what, Morgan, you called it, to the community.
I think they picked the wrong month to do it. But other than that, I really don't think they did anything.
Well, given that the company really hasn't shown the historical interest in the heritage of the company and so on, it really doesn't surprise me that they wouldn't realize that announcing this just shortly before World Land Rover Day, where it was introduced in Amsterdam, it just makes sense that it just didn't even occur to them. They've been trying to diminish it over
In other words, it didn't occur to Jerry.
I disagree with you. I think they knew exactly what they were doing. They knew when they were doing it, and they were trying to make this break going from the whatever you think Land Rover was. They've spent all this time over the last 75 years creating this brand called Land Rover, and it's not just Jerry, of course, but it's Land Rover, wants to make this break because they're moving upscale, they're moving to the luxury brand, and it was an opportunity to make the break. Where I have a problem is the timing, where you could have waited a month, you could have waited 2 weeks, something, and serviced the folks that got you there, given them something, have a World Land Rover Day, and then the next day you announce, okay, we're moving in this different direction. But they did nothing. It's just a bad feeling. It's a bad taste in your mouth that they did not consider the heritage owners, the used car owners that got them to where they are and kept the brand alive all this time.
From the perception of backpedaling that they've had after the initial announcement and what McGovern had come out and said, to me, more strikes me is that they just mishandled it in more ways than one. Timing is just one aspect of it. The fact that the market or the media reacted with, you're getting rid of Land Rover, which then prompted people to go and start telephoning their local dealership asking for the signs, implies that they got something wrong there, which prompted them the next day or very soon thereafter to come out and say, oh, no, it's a trust mark and all these other things, which then just points to it wasn't as well thought out as they probably thought it was. When you read the marketing material that came out, you're just confused.
Yeah, it is confusing. You have to read it a couple times. In that material, we say that getting rid of the Land Rover brand, it's not going to be on the hood anymore.
Yeah, and there's still, even in their own marketing materials, like if you compare the press release with their corporate reimagine page that describes what that process is, in the press release, they refer to themselves as JLR, which that's common and has been for
we do that all the time too. It's just easier, it's quicker.
Yeah, it's so much easier. And a lot of the press has said that they are changing the company name to just JLR, not even Jaguar Land Rover, so that the name really would disappear. But on their reimagined page, they'll refer to themselves as Jaguar Land Rover. They even go as far as saying Jaguar Land Rover is a house of brands: Range Rover, Defender, Discovery, Jaguar. We still have no idea exactly how much Land Rover is being removed from the name. Are they really consolidating down to just JLR for the company and then leaving Land Rover as the trust mark?
This is definitely a backpedaling. I think it was unclear. I think Dixon is right. Yes, we all saw this coming. A mile away, they were moving up market. They had talked about having this house of brands for at least several years.
Well, except they called them families before, but it was the same thing, splitting them into their own separate brands.
Right, and that we saw that coming. And this just goes to poor execution, and on top of a terrible time to make the announcement to all the people that got you there.
They just had the wrong marketing people executing this thing.
Yeah, and it goes from the best case inconsiderate to the worst case, downright disrespectful to all the history of the Land Rover.
Yep, I would agree. I would completely agree with that. Related, just because we're looking at the Land Rover's PR site. Can they not put gray on white for their text? It's just so hard to read. If anybody at Land Rover is listening, especially in the comm department, can you change that just to black instead of the gray? It's tough to read. No wonder, which made it all the more difficult.
Perhaps they don't want you reading all the fine print.
The reimagination strategy. It's also brands. Is it really?
You just have to go back to using Windows 98 or something like that. It doesn't have as many color shades on your monitor.
Yes, go back to days.
Go back to 16 color mode. There you go.
That's right.
Nobody needs more than 640K anyway.
That's how Land Rover started. You had one color. That was it. You got Grasmere green and you were happy for it. Let's go back to that.
Well, actually, speaking of going back, the early Land Rover. It's interesting that at this point, Land Rover or JLR, whatever, is back to upmarket brand that is. When the Land Rover was initially introduced, Rover Company was mostly known for making kind of upmarket balloons. And the Land Rover success, were hopeful. They knew it was useful, utilitarian, and not until 1970 with the Range Rover did they start moving Land Rover back upmarket.
Or move it
Obviously,
upmarket, period.
Well,
right,
actually,
exactly.
Historically, when you look at the North American dollar area, once you were into the 60s, Rover was moving the vehicle upmarket because they were certainly not cheap vehicles compared to what the competitors and so on that were available at the time. All I like to do is look at some of the advertising and run them through the inflation calculators and compare Jeeps and Power Wagons and everything else. And they were dear vehicles. And that's probably what taught them a bit about moving up market.
And they came with some pretty nifty upmarket luxury accessories like outside door handles and self-canceling turn signals. 2 windshield wipers.
Yes, exactly.
That work together.
Well, that were both supposed to work, period.
That's right, yes.
Hey, there's nothing better than going into a safety and the FW2 doesn't work. Pull the little handle out, you twist it back and forth with your hands, and a fail goes to a pass. Try that with your late 2A Series 3 and later windshield wipers.
Just a minute while I unbolt the motor from the rack and pull on the cable.
And one of the things that actually feels like more of a gut punch to most of us when Land Rover's just sort of plans to do away with the name is that it already feels like the current models not only being upmarket, but are just feel like completely different vehicles from the early ones that earlier. They don't even have to be all that early. Earlier models are just so night and day different. And I think a big part is industry-wide. All vehicles significantly different than they used to be. And Land Rover definitely held out the longest of all brands, with the exception of Jeep, I guess, holding on to body on frame, producing basically all four-wheel drive vehicles until I think 2010 was the first two-wheel drive Land Rover introduced. But a lot of that is wide, right? It's like the increased complexities and electronics due to safety and emission standards. Once they went over to monocoque for everything, which I guess didn't really happen until 2017 with the Disco 5. It's a throwaway vehicle. They just aren't the same maintainable, modifiable vehicle that they used to be.
Yeah, you can't order a new chassis from Rovers North for one of those.
Exactly. And the last part is that they've gone up market. The used market has gone up market as well. So that there's the history of Land Rover where even, what was it, in the 2000s when they said that 75% of all Land Rovers manufactured are still on the road.
And the other 25 made it back home again.
They got shot down by the advertising on that particular theme.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. But yeah, it just feels so different. And then, of course, the Range Rover that they had was just so full of models that we all saw it coming. Still, just the timing is the worst.
It's a niche brand. It's small manufacturer, even around the world, not just in the U.S. The folks that kept it in people's minds and kept the mark going, this community around the world, not just here in North America, in NADA, which, thanks for reminding me, Dixon, is North American dollar area, you could have at least said thank you. And then we're moving on. We get it. You were moving on. We saw you moving on. You've been moving on. Not just the House of Brands was communicated poorly, but I think this moving on to luxury was also poorly communicated over the years, not just a specific instance. It would have been nice had said thank you as the door closes to those of us who have created a podcast, have created other podcasts that have clubs around North America and clubs who are coming together to celebrate this mark that has brought all of us together as friends it would have been nice to say a little thank you before that door closes.
So just as a tangent, Rover does problem that other marks don't have, because when you look at North America, okay, albeit it's a very small market when you look at the series vehicles and so on, but how many other marks can sit there and say, using the 80 inch as an example, 20.3% of the 80 inches that were imported into North America still exist? Not all of them on the road, but still exist. Can you say 20% of any other vehicle from the late 40s, early 50s is still around? That's pretty impressive. That it's both a bonus and a hindrance, what Land Rover wants to do today.
Yeah, it eventually becomes a real problem. You designed a vehicle to last forever because you run out of customers.
I think the customers actually move on before the vehicle does.
Yeah, and hindsight is 2020, of course, but one of the interesting things that they've had a great opportunity to do, and that is that originally what we know as Land Rover, or the series Land Rover even, was just Land Rover. It was a model of Rover vehicles. Or Land Rover moved over to calling it the 90 and the 110 instead of the Series 2 and Series 3, and then switched over Defender. So when they introduced the new Defender, we had an opportunity, especially this year with the 75th, to say, look, the Defender really was a continuation of the Land Rover from 48 through 2016. And at that point, they could have said, now we're bringing Defender up to the level of Land Rover and putting Discovery and Range Rover up too. A lot of the customers who buy Range Rovers didn't really the connection with Land Rover anyway. There was that opportunity there waiting for them, and they just, we'll just brush it under the rug.
You should be appealing to new customers, but also saying thank you to the old customers. And on that note, that is the Trust Mark discussion and also the news for May of 2023. Knightsbridge Overland seat covers help protect your classic Land Rover, whether you're on the trail or cruising around town. They're the perfect solution for protecting your pristine Land Rover seats or to cover up your well-worn and aged seats. Each seat cover is hand-cut and sewn in the USA for a custom fit that looks like it's straight from the factory. Every seat cover is crafted using 600 denier Cordura material. It's waterproof, oil, and dust resistant. And I'm now going to add to that, bird crap resistant. So I park my vehicle, and I've been having this bird crap all over the outside of the vehicle, and I don't know why. I've looked for a nest. I couldn't find it. Don't know what's happening. But the bird every day would crap on the vehicle, and I'd wash it off. And one day it came out last week, and I'd left the windows down because the weather was nice, and the bird had gotten inside and crapped on the driver's seat and the passenger seat behind the driver's seat, right on the seat covers. I got a bucket of water, wiped those seats right off, and they dried up. They look great. Like it never happened. So I'm now adding to that, bird crap resistant.
Does the bird actually land on your 110 before it does this, or is it a low altitude bombing run?
I think it's hanging out on the roof rack. Knightsbridge Overland seat covers are designed to be extremely comfortable and keep you warmer in the winter and cooler in the summer, while providing protection against mud, dirt, grime, and bird crap, and more. Knightsbridge Overland seat covers are available for most classic Land Rovers, including Series, Defender, Discovery, and Range Rover. Select Knightsbridge Overland seat covers that's right for your Rover. Available in both tactical and non-tactical versions in 4 colors: black, tan, mocha, and gray. I have the mocha in my truck. Our tactical seat covers include military-grade MOLLE webbing that accommodates pouches, weapons, tools, first aid kits, and more. Non-tactical seat covers feature 3 handy pockets for much-needed extra storage in your Land Rover. They're very handy. Visit knightsbridgeoverland.com and enter STEER10 at checkout for 10% off your Knightsbridge Overland seat cover order. That's knightsbridgeoverland.com and enter STEER10 for 10% off your order. Protect and enhance your Land Rover seats with Knightsbridge Overland. Welcome to the Centresteer podcast, all the way from Oshkosh, Wisconsin, is Steve Owen. Steve Owen, welcome.
Welcome. Thanks for having me.
Quite welcome. Looking forward to this. You are driving your Series 1 from Oshkosh all the way to Cortland, New York for a NARC's Diamond Jubilee. How did that come about?
Because I'm crazy.
Well, of course, you're on the podcast.
No, I've had my 53 for a while, and I've always believed they should be driven. I saw the 75th anniversary came up, the event, and I thought, why not drive there? If you're going to a Land Rover event, you should drive your Land Rover there. So it'll be 4 days from Oshkosh to Wisconsin to the event. To get there, 4 days at the event, and then I'll probably spend 6 or 7 days ambling my way back cross country from the event.
Breakneck pace in a Series 1.
Yeah, 40 miles an hour is about my comfortable cruising speed. I did take it up to 48 the other day, and yes, you get a death wobble. So we won't be repeating that experiment anytime soon.
And it was empty going downhill, I assume.
Actually, it was, yes.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'd have got up to 42.
But no, I'm comfortable cruising at 38, 40 miles an hour.
Do you keep to like the secondary roads? I take it you stay off the interstates?
Oh, absolutely. I actually planned the trip, and this is not the first long distance trip I've done with TCM. TCM stands for the Charlie machine. It's named after our dog, my wife and I's dog, Charlie, who was a small Shih Tzu. And he was with me when I was doing the restoration most evenings, and the name stuck. So it's nicknamed TCM, and everybody calls it that. Unfortunately, he's 17 years old and passed away before I finished it, but we nicknamed it TCM after him.
That's a good name.
Yeah. It's not the first long distance trip I did around Lake Michigan in 2021, and that was 1,300 miles. The one thing I use when I start the planning of the trip is I use Google Cycle app, because that will keep you off all the major highways, all the interstates, and everything else like that.
Yeah, there's a top tip then for all of our series owners. No one's ever used that before. That's a great tip. So there's a special mapping software from Google for using your bicycle then.
There is.
That's the bicycle option in the mapping, I assume, right?
Yes. You have to be careful, because it will put you on like disused railroad tracks that have been converted into rails to trails. So you do have to look at your map closely, but I would say probably for 80% of the trips, it works beautifully. It keeps you on the back roads, not the shortest route, not the quickest route, but for a Series 1 with a top speed of around 45 miles an hour, cruising at 40, it's perfect.
I wonder if you could put in a set of pedals and backfeed the PTO and then be allowed on the bike trails.
I had enough trouble getting on this Zoom meeting. We don't need to make it any more complicated than it is.
Are you traveling alone? Do you have a chase car or friends that go with you, or do you have a navigator?
Nope. The navigation because I'm still original, so I can't put any modern electronics in it. I'm still on a dynamo and positive ground. So I write the instructions on a piece of paper. And
what's paper? What's paper?
Paper,
it's a processed dead tree, John.
Yeah. Most people find it in the bathroom, but I'm not going to go there. I don't use toilet roll. That would be a good idea, though, because it could unroll as I'm driving along. I could have a moving map if I wrote it on toilet paper.
Instruction scroll.
Yeah. But so all I do is I write that day's directions on a piece of paper and hold it onto the dashboard with a magnet.
There you go.
And as the only problem is, like on the trip around Lake Michigan, one day they all blew out the window. Well, I don't have the door tops on, so they blew out the door top. So, yeah, the rest of the day was make it up as you go along. But no, it works. As for company, the Lake Michigan trip, we had Dave Alton, who's out of Minnesota.
Oh, yeah, we met.
He has a 1966 Series 2 ambulance. So he came and drove that around Lake Michigan with me. And then we had Steve, for last name gone out the head. Anyway, he had a 110 Defender, and he met us in Ludington, and he drove around Lake Michigan with us. So there was the three of us on this trip, the New York trip. Dave is going to join us again from Minnesota. Tony Kiefer, I believe it is going to join us. I think they're both Dave will bring his ambulance. Tony's got a 109 station wagon, I believe. And then John, and I can't remember John's last name, he will be joining us also. He'll be meeting us at the ferry at Ludington as we cross Lake Michigan. Manitowoc as we cross Lake Michigan. So there'll be 4 of us in the convoy from Wisconsin.
Ooh.
And then we hope to pick up a couple more. There's been some interest. Some people said they're going to join us. Whether they do or not, I don't know. But those who have asked, I've gave them the route maps. I've emailed them the maps. I've emailed them the campsites we're staying at. And basically, they're on their own. I'm not the Grand Marshal of the parade. You break down, we'll help you, but you're on your own. If I break down, I don't expect them. They can help me, and I'm sure they will. And it worked out really well around Lake Michigan in 2021. We had great fun. We'd drive for an hour and a half, stop, and that was a great adventure. Hopefully this one to Anark, however you pronounce it. Hopefully
know.
just
Anark.
I'm not sure.
Anarchy. Hope it's just as much fun, and that's part of this whole thing is the adventure, the anticipation of actually getting there.
Exactly.
And then getting home, hopefully.
Well, yeah, there is that bit as well, but I've paid for the entrance and I paid for everything else. I want to get there. I'm not worried about coming home. I can always abandon it and fly home and pick it up later.
There's no deadline involved with getting home.
Not really. No, I'm not. I have a work deadline. I got to be back at work, but I can be fairly flexible with that. The deadline for me is getting to the event, and getting home is, that's why I've allowed 8 days to get home.
So generous. Take us back. What exactly is TCM, the child machine, and how did you acquire it?
So TCM, it has a long history with me going back over 30 years. I moved here in 1992 to the US from England. Oshkosh, where I live, Oshkosh, Wisconsin, has a huge air show. I can quite honestly say the Americans, we do like to brag, but it has the largest air show in the world. I came from England. I was married in 92. I met my wife here, got married in 92, moved permanently from England in 1992, and I had no work permit. And I was driving around and just the back roads around here, around Oshkosh, and I saw in basically a barn door the front end of the Land Rover. So I stopped because I've always had Land Rovers. And I stopped and knocked on the guy's door. And yes, it turned out that it was his father-in-law's. He'd actually towed it back from Arizona, which was about 1,200 miles, to just outside Oshkosh. And I tried to buy it, and he wouldn't sell it. It was his father-in-law's who had died, and he'd inherited it, and he was always going to restore it. Long story short, we'll fast forward to 2007, which is 15 years later. He died. They had an estate sale, and unfortunately, I was visiting family in the UK, missed the estate sale, came back home, immediately went to the house, which was vacated. Nothing, no Land Rover. Went to a couple of scrap yards, didn't see it in any scrap yards. Nobody had seen it. So it disappeared. I thought, well, okay, that's the end of it. My income is I install fireplaces for a living, wood stoves and wood fireplaces and stuff. And I went to a house about 40 miles from here and went to install a wood burner, a wood stove. And after I got talking, the guy goes, "Oh, you're English?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Oh, I've got a car you'd like to see." And he opens the barn door and I went, "Oh, John McDonald's Land Rover. I wonder where that went." And there was the Land Rover. He'd bought it at the estate sale in 2007. This was 2010, and was going to restore it. Fast forward to 2017. So now we're 1992 to 2017, 25 years, but thereabouts. I went back to the house to do a second fireplace, and his wife was there. And I asked him about the Land Rover, and I will say every other word began with F, ended in K or K-I-N-G. And what had happened, they got divorced 4 years earlier in 2013. She kicked him out of the house. She got the house, and he'd abandoned the Land Rover. Then she remembered I wanted it. We agreed on a price, but I really wanted to buy it for him. I found out the title was in his name, not her name. So then the lawyers got involved. Long story short, and this is coming up pretty quick to its 5th anniversary, on the 6th of June, 2017, I paid $5,000 for a Series 1 1953 Series 1 Land Rover that had been sat from 1984 to 2017.
Wow.
Apart from being trailered from one house to another house, 40 miles, it had not been touched. That, as they say, is when the fun began.
Now, this gentleman that had it before you, they got it from the estate sale. Did he do any work on it? Did he start anything?
Nothing. All he did is he put it on a trailer, towed it to his house, which was about 40 miles away, took it off the trailer, parked it in the barn, and left it there.
So the good news is this guy didn't do anything wrong to it.
He didn't do anything wrong with it, and nor did the person before him did anything wrong with it. The only thing, actually, when I got it and I started, first of all, let's step back here. So I've always had Land Rovers. I've owned an 88. I've had a military lightweight, which I restored. Couldn't bring that with me to the US because it didn't meet the 25-year rule at the time. I regret selling it. Somebody knows where it is, let me know. And then when I moved here, I had a Range Rover Classic for a 92 Range Rover for a while till I blew that up. And then they got too expensive. They became too plasticky, and my day-to-day vehicle now is a Dodge truck. So I knew what I had. I knew I'd bought a 1953 Series 1 80-inch Land Rover, the last year of the 80 inches, before they went to 86 and then to 88. So I knew what I had. What I did not realize, and I learned very quickly, was how rare they were in the United States. And that's when I started to panic, because I'm like, oh, what have I done? It turned out, and Dixon and Ben Smith with their website, I found out there was only 169 imported to the USA that year. So now I'm sitting on a vehicle there's probably more Ferraris than there are Series 1 Land Rovers in the country. But
there's more 80 inches running around than Freelanders. So you're in good company.
Well, I'm not going to pass a comment on that.
Go ahead. You're among friends.
No. I might revoke my citizenship. I just became a U.S. citizen, and I'd like to remain that way. No, so I ended up, the saving grace of all this is the internet. You can love or hate it, but I started to make inquiries and started to call people. And I'd used people like Rovers North in the past for parts for my Range Rover. I'd used some other suppliers that my mind forgets. And all I got was, oh, Series 1? No, we don't deal with those. Oh, Series 1? We don't deal with those. Oh, you got to call Ike, and we all know Ike. So I called Ike, and he went, oh, yeah, I can help you. That made me feel a little happier. The other part of this, and you'd have to go to my Facebook page to look at it, but the steering was not original by any means. And that was the only part of the restoration that worried me, because knowing it was left-hand drive, knowing that parts were going to be rare, I thought, well, if I can't find the steering, then I'm done. I'll just part it out and get my money back. So I called Ike, and this was quite a funny conversation, because I said to Ike, I need some left-hand drive steering parts. And he goes, well, what do you need? I said, well, open the parts page, and you see everything listed on that page from the steering wheel down to the wheels. I need everything. What they had done to keep this vehicle running was welded a steel rod through the dash onto a knuckle, onto a power steering box that they had welded to between the front dumb irons by the bumper, and welded a drop arm onto the tie rods, and that was the steering. It needs to be seen to be believed.
Did it work?
Yes, it worked. Would I have trusted it? No. And obviously, I don't know.
And with everything welded together, there's no serviceability.
Oh, none whatsoever. No.
So it may work, but not once it wears out, you're done.
Yeah. And it was probably like the old Johnny Cash part. There was a 53, a 57, a 64 part on it. None of it was Land Rover parts. And Ike called me back about a month later and said, yeah, okay, I've got everything. It's going to cost you this much. And I said, good, ship it. That was the start of the restoration, because then I knew I could get pretty much everything. We tore the vehicle down to the Burr chassis, And as I tore it down, I began to find out that everything was original to the vehicle. The dates were on there. The radiator it was built in December of 52, brought into routes in Los Angeles in 53, January of 53. But everything was dated as they are. So I had a 52 carburetor, 1152 starter motor, 1152 radiator, 1152 wheel hubs. Everything was original to the vehicle. So it was just a case of the chassis still had the original paint on underneath the tub. Being in it, because it spent its thirst from 53 to 1981, it was in Arizona. So no rust. It was run in Wisconsin for 3 years, maybe a little bit, and then it sat undercover all the rest of the time. So there was no rust. Nothing done to the chassis. I didn't even paint it. I just power washed it and left it alone and started to mechanically rebuild everything up, overhaul the engine, the gearbox, had the carburetor. Well, I did that, rebuilt that. Same with dynamo, starter motor. So brakes, I put new brake cylinders in, brake lines and everything, but pretty much kept it as original as I could.
Have you made any upgrades or improvements?
None whatsoever.
So it's dead stock.
It's dead stock. 2-liter engine, 53 Siamese bore engine, original springs.
What kind of tires do you run?
The only ones I could find that I liked, I run 650 SATs from Coca Tire. So they're kind of an aggressive tread, but they handle pretty well. I tend not to drive in the rain because Land Rovers are not known for being watertight or even waterproof to a point. I do have a canvas top on it.
Calling them water loose would be generous sometimes.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I have been caught out in the rain. I actually did a road rally a couple of weeks ago. I did 140 miles in the rain with the lights on. It ran fine. Did the restoration, mechanical restoration. It is stock. As Dixon confirmed, he's actually seen TCM. He was over for EAA last year and stopped by, and we had a few beers, and he went through it. It is stock. Basically, if it needed replaced, it was replaced. If it didn't, I had the instrument panels I sent away to Mike Flannelly in England to be overhauled and repaired.
So the Speedo works?
It works. Wow. Well, it give or take 4 or 5 miles an hour either side, but yes, it works.
The wipers work? And the wipers work?
Wiper. There's only one wiper.
On a Series 1?
Yes.
Okay.
The second
they were options.
Oh,
yeah, the second one's an
one,
option.
The second's an option, and I don't have it. I have one wiper. So if you're in the passenger seat, well, reach out and wipe the window if you want to see.
Yeah, you're going slow enough.
Yeah, most of my passengers just scream anyway.
But that's when it's dry.
That's true. I'll just finish up because March of 2020, if we can remember that far back, I think it was March 20th, I think. We got the brakes done. We took it out on the road for the very first time after 3 years, or just short of 3 years of restoration. And the very next day, the world shut down.
Yes.
Got it done just in time for the pandemic.
Just in time to shut it down, and I unfortunately didn't do much in 2020. 2021, we took it around Lake Michigan. 2022, I was running it up till about September of 22. I was on my way to a car show. I blew the head gasket, which cracked the block on the Siamese engine.
Ooh.
I had that welded, rebuilt the engine this winter, and now I'm got trust and faith in my mechanical inabilities to get it to New York. And that's the story of TCM to date.
Now, if anyone is interested in reading all of this, Stephen has actually written 32 different articles for the OVLR newsletter, which can all be found online. And you can actually follow along with all of the rebuild of TCM from the first one in May of 2018 all the way till, actually more than 32 because I don't have indexed this year's, because you've actually written up your drive to Anarch as another one. So 33 or 34 articles, but they're all available if anyone wanted to read them at the ovlr.org website in the newsletter archives.
That's a good resource there and background. So the shakedown cruise cracked the block?
No, I was on my way. It was September of 2022. I was on my way to a car show. It started to run a little rough. And I thought, oh, so I turned around, came home, and disappointed. The following weekend, I had another car show. I got up at 4 a.m. I thought, well, I'll take the head off. If it saw it was a blown head gasket, I'm thinking, wow, this is a quick fix. But as I look closely on the Siamese bore, when they bored it out from 1.6 to 2 liter in 52, there was no cooling jacket between 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 cylinder. And if you blow a head gasket between 1 and 2 or 3 and 4, the joint, the distance between those 2 cylinder bores is not a lot. I would say probably half an inch or less, more like 3/8 of an inch. And if you blow the gasket though with the heat transfer, you actually crack the block because there's no cooling. There's no cooling between the cylinders. And that's what happened. The block went to a company, Shell Welding in Iowa. They specialize in welding engine blocks. They do all over the world. They had engines from 1920 Buicks and all kinds of wonderful stuff when I dropped it off. And I got that back around Christmas and rebuilt the engine.
So TCM lives and will be rolling to Cortland.
A very slow roll to Cortland, yes.
How many days are you allowing for that trip? I can't remember.
4 days. We're going to leave on what I did. I broke it down into roughly 200-mile segments each day.
Okay. All right.
Now, it doesn't sound a lot, but at 40 miles an hour, it's 5 to 6 hours driving each day. So first day, we'll leave Oshkosh. We'll go across. We'll get the ferry across Lake Michigan to Ludington, Michigan, and then we're going to go about an hour and a half inland to a campsite. Second day, we travel across Michigan, again, using the cycling app, because the only 2 ways across was either up, I think, on I-69, which I don't want to do, obviously, or go down to Detroit and cross at Detroit. And I did not want to do that. I found on the cycling app the ferry across the St. Clair River. So we're going to head to that. So the second day, we get across to the east side of Michigan. The third day, we cross into Canada and drive through southern Ontario to Niagara Falls. We overnight in Niagara Falls. And then on the fourth day, we will cross back into the U.S. at New York, and then about 189 miles to Cortland. So roughly 200 miles a day each segment for 4 days.
You're pretty much going straight as the bird flies.
Pretty much, yeah. There's a little dip south, I think just shy of 800, I think. Like 796.
Okay.
Does that include the ferry?
That includes the ferry.
That's
Which might actually be faster than the Series 1.
It will be faster than the
Yeah, but it floats better than the Series 1.
Yeah.
I hope. We've done the ferry before, and
I think a rock floats better than a Series 1.
Actually, I have driven the Series 1 on water. I've driven TCM across, because we live in northern Wisconsin and the lakes freeze and we have ice roads.
Yeah.
And in February of 21, I actually got COVID and I was quarantined. I don't like sitting still, let's put it that way. And we had one of those really super cold days where they don't use salt on the roads and stuff. So I actually jumped in TCM, one, to see if it would start, and 2, I actually drove across Lake Winnebago. It's 10 miles straight across. So I drove the 10 miles across, had a sandwich and a can of Coke, and then turned around and drove the 10 miles back.
That's easy enough to do when the water is in its solid phase.
Well, yeah, it was about 24 inches of ice under me, so it wasn't too bad.
Should be enough.
Yeah, it was enough. And so that was quite a fun day. So Land Rovers do drive on water, frozen water, quite well.
So let's go back even further to your time in the UK. And were you a Land Rover person then? And how did that start?
Yes, I could say I've always been a Land Rover person. My late father, there was my brother and I and my father, and he came home one day with a 1959 109 canvas 109, canvas top 109, and said, "We are going camping." And as kids, that's what we did. We had this beat up 109, and a few things I remember. One was a fire behind the dash, typical Lucas wiring. It had
Would that be a campfire?
Oh, it was more than a campfire. And unfortunately, my dad was deaf. and he could not hear the kids screaming, "Dad, the Land Rover's on fire." Finally, when the headlights went out, he realized something was wrong, pulled over, and figured out, yeah, okay. Me working on as a kid on a farm, I lived out in the country, and I used to deliver milk door to door out the back of a 88 short wheelbase van, solid sides Land Rover. I actually learned to drive in that Land Rover. And I actually took my UK driving test in that Land Rover. It was an 88 short wheelbase. And the first part of the test was okay. The second part of the test, and they have a pretty strict road test in the UK, it started to snow. And the examiner was like, "Okay, we need to postpone this." And I said, "Why?" He said, "Well, it's snowing." And I said, "I got one question. Am I passing or am I failing this test?" And he said, "You're passing." I said, "Good." Hit the red lever, put it in four-wheel drive, hit the yellow knob, put it in four-wheel drive, and continued to take my test in a snowstorm. And I passed. I worked on the farm till I started work and saved up some money. My first vehicle was beat up 88 short wheelbase, which I had for about 6 months. And then, like most of them in the UK, the chassis rotted away and that went to the scrap heap. My next one, I bought a lightweight, ex-military lightweight, 88. Had fun with that. Did a lot of trips around Europe in that, actually, and around Britain. It got tired. I decided that was the very first one I restored. I stripped it down, rebuilt it, ran it for about 12 months, then got married and moved to the US and had to sell it. In the meantime, the lightweight became my fun vehicle, and I did buy one of the very first Discoveries manual box. I thought they were a fantastic vehicle, those early Discoveries. Loved it to pieces, but I sold that when I moved here. And once I moved here, I looked around and I ended up buying a 1992 Range Rover Classic, as they call it now. Of course, they weren't classics back then. Four-door, red. Ran that. I had 285,000 miles on it, and I blew a cylinder. And that was the end of that. It was getting a little tired by then. Sold that for Spurs and found out Land Rovers were way too expensive for me. And that was the end of my ownership of Land Rovers until I got my Series 1. Nice. I've always loved Land Rovers. I've always called them a love-hate relationship. You either love them or you hate them. And there's no
both.
Usually in the same time. Yes, but you own one, you always want another one. You want another one and another one.
And if you get rid of one, you wish you had not sold that one?
Yes.
Well, you get rid of one, you use the money to buy another.
Yeah.
They're like potato chips. You can't have just one.
Oh, don't have potato chips in my fall down.
So what have you been driving in between then, dear sir? Anything catch your eye?
No, my actual everyday vehicle, I actually have a Ram Dodge 1500 truck, and I love it. That's my daily vehicle, and I have no qualms about it. This is actually my second one I've had. I did buy the J-Word once, never again. I bought a Wrangler and had that for 6 months, and was probably the biggest mistake I ever made. But no, my day-to-day runner is just a regular Ram Dodge 1500 pickup 4x4.
Sure.
And
They get the job done.
It gets the job done. It holds all the crap I want. My wife is a huge gardener. So this time of year, it spends most of its time in garden centers being loaded up with flowers. I have taken the Series 1. You can't get as many flowers in there. So that does not make number one very happy. So if we're all married, and what happens when you make number one mad, then you tend to make sure that everybody's happy.
Right. So you can be happy.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. So the lightweight, you said you drove around Europe in that. So you do any interesting adventures come out of the lightweight in Europe?
Sort of. One thing because you have twin tanks in the lightweight, used to take jerry cans and never stop at gas stations. We would literally run it on the passenger tank till it was almost run out, switch to the tank under the driver's seat, and then the guy in the back would pass the 5-can jerry can over, and you'd pour the gas in because the tanks are under the seats, just like the Series 1s, and pour the gas into the tank as you were going down the highway. Probably not the smartest thing ever to do.
As long as you don't drop your lit cigarette while you're pouring in.
Well, none of my friends smoke, so we were fine with that one. But yeah, I mean, we had some fun. The other thing, my lightweight was painted in EOD colors. It had the red bumperettes, the red wings, the red warning signs on the back, the EOD stickers on it, and nobody ever overtook you. you could sit on because the lightweight, I could do 55 with the lightweight easily, 60 with the overdrive. I had an overdrive on it, but nobody would ever overtake you.
I bet they gave you plenty of room to merge into the lane too.
Oh, absolutely. And so we had some fun with that because we could actually go down like the interstate at 20 miles an hour and nobody would overtake you. Nobody. And one thing we did, we used to visit a lot of air shows, and especially on military bases back then, there was a lot of American bases. And with the lightweight, we never paid to get in because you'd pull up to the gate that the Americans' security would just see this English Land Rover in EOD colors and wave you through the gate. Never ask any questions.
No questions, yes. You're
no
military.
Question.
Come on in.
Come on in. We weren't military. We were civilians. It was
you're there to sweep the planes for any explosives.
Yeah, and so we went to a lot of air shows that we had never actually paid entrance fees to.
Well, you paid, sir. You were driving a lightweight.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
You were refueling at speed. That's like air-to-air refueling.
The other thing, the beauty about having twin tanks was you could pull up in a gas station and use two separate pumps to fill the tanks up and then go inside and say, which pump? Oh, 3 and 7. And they'd look at you like, what? 3 and 7? How do you mean? Well, it's 3. And that actually happens here because the Series 1, obviously the tank's on what is the passenger seat here. And a number of times I pulled into gas stations to refuel and they've shut the pump off because all they can see me is with the gas nozzle inside the vehicle.
I hate when that happens.
Oh, yeah. It's
happened to me, and I hate it.
And you got to go in, get the manager, explain everything, and a couple of them have come out and like, oh, okay, sorry. And then you got to start all over again. But it is annoying, yes.
Where exactly did you get to in Europe? I guess I take it Germany. So this would have been before the wall fell, I take it?
Oh, yeah. This was in the 80s, early 80s. So Rheinstadt in Germany, Frankfurt. We go into the Netherlands to some of the Dutch shows, Belgium, northern France.
Norway? I always want to go to those roads in Norway. They look spectacular.
I never did Norway or Denmark, any of the Scandinavian countries. We always did northern France and the Netherlands. One of the big trips, I always took the ferry out of Hull, Rotterdam. So it was a 24-hour North Sea crossing. So you could get on the ferry, drink for 8 hours, sober up for 8 hours, and sleep for 8 hours. And then arrive in Rotterdam and then carry on into Germany and places like that. So we'd go out for about 3 or 4 days. It was fun. They were fun trips, but anything exciting? I don't know that can actually be published.
Fair. That's fair. Well, how about back here in the U.S. in your Rangy Classic? Did you get around to shows in the Classic? Did you do off-roading, or are you just mainly an overlander?
I was just in the Classic. It was mainly an overlander. The wife and I, Pat, we did an awful lot of trips out west, Colorado. We did some off-roading in Colorado, in New Mexico, Nevada. We did an awful lot of mileage. I would say that Range Rover was a beautiful cruising machine with the off-road capability. It was still coil springs back then, no air suspension, which I preferred. The coils, I've driven some of the air ones. I just think the coils to me were a much better option and should have stayed that way, but that's me.
Well, the air suspension was not properly engineered, so...
Is anything by Land Rover properly engineered?
Some things are. Some things have really had good staying power. So I mean, that to me speaks to good engineering. But in the case of the air suspension, they just didn't do it right.
No, the biggest problem they had with the air suspension up here, which didn't apply to me, was in the winter, it would freeze. You'd get moisture in the system and it would freeze up and then collapse. And you had to sit there and wait for it to thaw out before you could run it. And that's happened to a few people I know have had them. But no, the Range Rover, we ran all over the United States. We were out in New England, Massachusetts, Boston, that area, up to Vermont. We went everywhere with it. So that was a classic cruising vehicle, beautiful.
What's the club scene like in Wisconsin? We don't hear much of Wisconsin Land Rover clubs.
There isn't one.
Basically,
as far as I'm aware, there is not an organized Wisconsin Land Rover owners club. The nearest
sounds like an opportunity.
I have enough on my plate. There is a Wisconsin Land Rover Facebook page, of a loose connection of guys. There are some people, like the other day, I took it to work and there was a gentleman showed up with a 90. He'd imported right-hand drive 90, and he lived 5 miles from me. I had no idea. So we connected and we'll get together. Another gentleman through Facebook found out I had a 53. He just bought a 56 he's restoring in Madison. But there really is no organized club in Wisconsin. A lot of enthusiasts, but nothing really Ottawa or Minnesota where they're well more organized. So
that brings you back around to traveling to the Anarch's Diamond Jubilee in your 1953 Series 1. You're going to travel 800 miles across water and land, crossing an international border, to say also. Twice. And you expect to do that in 4 days, traveling at roughly 40 miles an hour. And how laden will that Series 1 be? How much are you, what are you packing in?
Everything but the kitchen sink.
Is Pat coming with you?
No.
Okay. Are you traveling alone on this, or will you have some chase cars?
Well, there will be a few of us. Dave Alton from Minnesota. He has a 66 ambulance, ex-military, British military ambulance. He actually did the Lake Michigan trip with me in 21, and he is joining me on this trip. He has got there's another gentleman, Tony Kiefer. He will be joining us. He has a 109, I believe, a station wagon. And then John Walt, I believe his name is, another Minnesota gentleman, and he's bringing a 109 also. So there will be 4 of us. There's a couple more people shown some interest, but have not committed. One of them, I know Eric in Michigan, he's trying to get his finished in time. Otherwise, he may just tag along. But we'll all be driving solo. My wife will do short trips around town with me. I usually drive with the door tops off because I am 6'4" and 250 pounds, and I don't fit in a Series 1 very well.
Yeah.
You don't say.
Yeah. So I tend to drive with the door tops off, which my wife does not like going to the hairdresser very often, and it tends to mess her up. So she rather declines trips. Yeah.
Buy her a hat.
I tried that and it blew off.
Oh,
just like your directions.
Yes, just like the direction. So we'll make the trip fun. We'll do about an hour and a half segment, 40 to 60 miles, stop. I have a very good habit of my pet penguins, as Dixon is aware of those. They're very good at finding bars, breweries, and adult alcoholic beverages. The penguins will sniff those out and perk up and tell me when to stop. The Lake Michigan trip, we emptied a biker bar one day with the Land Rovers. So hopefully we have some not too exciting days like that, but it's part of the adventure of getting there is actually getting there. I've been watching the posts on the websites and guys looking for trailers and transports, and they're only coming 200-300 miles. Drive it, guys. Drive it. That's what Land Rovers are for. If you haven't got the time, I can understand the time constraints, but I just figured if I'm going to a 75th anniversary of Land Rover, I'm going to bring a 70-year-old vehicle and drive it.
I think a lot of them, the plan is not so much that they're worried about getting there. It's they want to break it in the woods and then be able to drag it home.
That gets expensive. I'm not saying I won't do any of the trails when I'm there, but I do have to remember that I do have 800 miles to get home, and
right.
I don't have a trailer. Yeah, I can see that. To me,
I don't like breaking my stuff in the woods either, because then I have to fix it.
Yes, and they're expensive.
And I don't get paid to fix it.
No, I don't.
Not
either.
my own stuff.
Not my own stuff, no. And again, Series 1s are not for the faint of heart. Their price parts are scarce and they're expensive. There are some places like the CKD shop that are now producing parts, Land Rover Series 1 Club producing parts, but I can see why they're getting expensive. It'd be an adventure. As for what's loaded, after my Lake Michigan trip, I got it sorted down. One thing I did, because, again, we're not exactly waterproof, is I bought have acquired a lot of ex-military ammunition cans of different sizes and boxes. So I can keep, I found one box that fits perfectly in the back of the 80-inch that has all my camping gear in, my sleeping material, my sleeping bag, and because I'm getting older, I will take an air mattress, my one breakdown through modern technology.
Modern convenience. You're going to use a cot, huh?
I'm going to use a cot. And then I have another couple of ammunition cams for clothing, spare parts, because you can't exactly run to Napa and pick off a shelf. So I'll be bringing a spare dynamo, a spare water pump, fan belt, coil, rotor arm, spark plugs, things like that. Things that possibly could go wrong. If the starter motor fails, then I'll just push it, or I'll use a starting handle. Something catastrophic like a gearbox or an engine fails, well, there's not much I can do there. I do have a spare head gasket. Maybe if I do something catastrophic with the engine, some new head gasket and JB weld to get me home. We'll see. That's the beauty about a simple Land Rover, is you can work on them. You can limp them home if you have to. Break a drive shaft, break a rear differential, bring it home on the front wheels, take the drive shaft off and drive it home on the front wheel drive.
Are you bringing any parts with you?
Yeah, just basically parts. I'm just bringing a dynamo, water pump, and that's about it, I think. I do have a list to load. Just those things, I think, are the likely things to fail. Yeah, I don't see the need for anything else. Coil, some electronics.
And at the Diamond Jubilee, where do you expect to be hanging out? Where could folks say hello to you? Or,
well, I'm cheap. I'm English, and I'm cheap, and I'll be in the primitive camping area somewhere. I don't know. They said there's a display area for some vehicles, but I've not been invited, and I don't know if I want it there either, to be honest.
That idea has gone past, just because it was just too much work to organize, and I think folks want to enjoy themselves and run on the trails and that kind of thing. But there will be some vehicles there on display that are specialty vehicles, not only vintage ones, but also brand new ones.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So, yeah, I'll be in the primitive camping. Just look for the penguins. As Dixon's sniggering over there. I'll be bringing my penguins along with me. They will be with them. They're my sort of bodyguards, keep me out of trouble. And I'm looking forward to meeting a lot of people who have helped me. Well, Dixon we've met, but Ben Smith, I don't know who else is going to be there off the top of my head, but I know a lot of people who follow my Land Rover on Facebook page are going to be there. Some of the Minnesota guys, Rick Olson and guys like that. So I'm looking forward just to meeting people, fellow enthusiasts, sitting down, shooting the shit, telling tall tales like all Land Rover owners do, and having fun. That's what it's about. Plus, I want to see some of the other vehicles out there. I think Conrad Barraclough, another Englishman, I think he's coming over. I don't know if he's bringing his 101. Conrad, I've helped him. He has a Series 1. We've helped each other back and forth. So I'm looking forward to that. It's just the social aspect of it and meeting people. And I'll be at the Friday night dinner, but anybody's welcome. Stop by, say hello. I don't drink beer. That's my one rule on the trip. You show up with Bud Light or Coors Light or Miller Lite, you will end up in Lake Michigan.
That's a long way to take someone.
Yes. Well, it's fine.
You're going to have to go 800 miles to take them back with you, to throw them in the lake.
It's fine. Well, there's some Finger Lakes there. I could probably lose them in there.
That's what they make duct tape for.
Yeah, exactly. They don't scream too much. No, so I'm just looking forward to the social side more than anything else, and just having fun. The fun getting there, the adventure of getting there, relaxing when I get there, and then the fun of getting back. Call me crazy, but I'm driving my 53.
Steve, I want to thank you very much for coming on the podcast and giving us your story of TCM and traveling to NARC's Diamond Jubilee. Look forward to meeting you at the Diamond Jubilee.
Well, thank you. And thank you for this opportunity. It's been quite an enjoyable evening, and I look forward to seeing everybody. And Dixon, the penguins will be there. They're looking forward to meeting Uncle Dixon.
Oh, very good. It shall be quite the reunion.
Yes. They've got a surprise for you. I'll forewarn you. They're planning something for you.
Oh, excellent. Excellent. I'm looking forward for it.
Thanks again, and appreciate it for the opportunity to talk about it, and may the adventures continue.
We hope you enjoyed show number 122 for May of 2023. Thanks to Steve Owen. You can follow his adventures as he drives his Series 1 to the Diamond Jubilee. We'll have a link to it in the show notes. And also thank you to the One True Packs for his continued production support. And last but not least, thanks to Dixon, Harold, and Morgan. Thank you, gentlemen, coming on the podcast again.
You're welcome.
Yes, thank you very much.
We post a new podcast at the end of every month. Our website is centresteer.com. That's CENTRE in the British spelling. And that has all our shows that you can listen to and show notes that have links to the stories we discussed in today's podcast. You can directly support the podcast at patreon.com/Centresteer and join Steve as our new Patreon supporter. You can buy us a t-shirt, sticker, or even a tee. The menu on our webpage has all the links. If you have an idea for a guest, feel free to send us the details and contact information if you have it. You can also connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and leave a voicemail on our website. I remind you, in honor of Land Rover's 75th anniversary, you're invited to bring your Land Rover, especially Series and Defender owners, to the Pittsburgh Vintage Grand Prix, July 2023. That's the 22nd and 23rd. There's a link to registration in our show notes. And you have 2 months to prepare for that. You have 1 month. Well,
You have 2 weeks.
to prepare for an
And
Arcs
you have
Diamond Jubilee.
6 weeks to get your ass to Pittsburgh.
Absolutely. You better get started. Or just stay. You go to the Diamond Jubilee. It's only 6 hours from Cortland to Pittsburgh.
So the 4 weeks ought to be enough time to get it running and push it to Pittsburgh.
If it's running while you're at Greek Peak, get to the highest elevation you can, and you might be able to coast. It's all downhill from New York to Pennsylvania, right?
Mostly. Hopefully we'll see you at both of the events, the Anarch's Diamond Jubilee and at the Vintage Grand Prix. Thank you for listening. We'd love to hear from you and what you're up to in your Land Rover. Until next time, I ask you to share the show with one other Land Rover enthusiast.
On behalf of the entire crew here at the Centresteer podcast, I'd like to thank you for listening to us. We know you have a choice when it comes to your podcast content, and we do appreciate your choosing us. Please take a moment to look around you for any personal items you may be leaving behind, especially in the overhead bins. Remember that some items may have shifted during the show. Please watch your step on the way out, and you may now resume your important things.
Call me crazy, but I'm driving my 53.